Well, London-based legal expert Alexander Mercouris joins me now live from London. Alexander, from a legal perspective, is Snowden in the clear now? In effect, is he a free man?
Well, he's a free man in the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation has granted him temporary asylum, so he has a right to be resident there, and he has the same residence rights as essentially Russian citizens do. Outside the Russian Federation, he is not a free man. If he were to come to Germany or France or Britain or, of course, any one of those countries, he would quite definitely face extradition demands from the United States.
So there's nothing legally that the US could do now, the fact that he is in Russia. Unless he steps out of Russia, he is in effect safe. Or is there something that they could do?
Well, since he's been granted temporary asylum, the answer is that they cannot do anything in Russia. The Russian authorities have anyway made it very clear that they are not going to return Mr. Snowden to the United States. And if you look at the 1951 Refugee Convention, which is the convention which governs these matters, one can see why the Russian authorities would say that, and legally speaking, they're right.
Do you see that this will be a temporary asylum, or perhaps could it turn into being something a little more permanent? Because many are saying it's going to be very difficult for Snowden to get out of Russia now.
Well, if I can just explain this, Russia has basically two types of asylum. There's temporary asylum, which is what Mr. Snowden now has, and then there is refugee status, which is rather more permanent. My impression is that the intention eventually is to apply for refugee status. The reason he applied for temporary asylum is in order to get himself out of the airport. It's dealt with much more quickly. It's the barrier that he has to cross in order to show that he's entitled to that asylum is easier. So his lawyer and he decided to apply for temporary asylum to get him out of the airport. Now that he is in Russia proper, I think the intention will be to apply for full refugee status.
And Alexander,
which will allow him to stay in Russia.
Right. What are the implications here for the relations between the two? This couldn't come at a worse time, could it? We've got tensions over the Magnitsky case. We've got the anti-missile defense system in Europe. We've also got the disagreements over Syria. This couldn't happen at a worse time.
Well, the ball, in a sense, is in the American court. The Russian authorities have been extremely careful to do this by the book. They've insisted on Mr. Snowden making a proper application. He's done it through a lawyer. There is a well-founded case here for asylum. I'm not just the person who says that. Amnesty International says it. Human Rights Watch says it. Given that this is so, the US has no legal grounds to object to this. Now, if the US nonetheless wants to jeopardize its very important relationship with Russia, because Russia has done something which it is legally fully entitled to do, that is a decision for the US. But many people will, I think, feel that if the US does that, then the US, frankly, is behaving in a very strange and self-destructive way.
What about the fate of Snowden's fellow whistleblower Manning? He's been charged for espionage, but could perhaps Snowden, if he is brought to trial, face the charges of aiding the enemy and in effect be facing a far stiffer sentence and worse predicament than Manning?
I don't think so. The charges which have been brought against Snowden are charges under the Espionage Act. The United States has not gone so far with Snowden as to allege that he's actually helped the enemy. Of course, were he to go to the United States, one just doesn't know what might happen. But at the moment, the charges against Snowden are under the Espionage Act and for theft. 3 charges under the Espionage Act, 1 for theft.
Just finally, the predicaments facing Assange, Manning and now Snowden, is it a suggestion perhaps the law is really going to crack down on these people and other whistleblowers in the future? Is that it? Will whistleblowers now shut up because the law is going to really be very severe now?
Well, they're not shutting up for the moment. I mean, we've already seen what's happened to Manning, we've already seen what's happened to Assange, and yet here is Mr. Snowden, nonetheless, in spite of all of that, going ahead and being a whistleblower. the simple fact is the US authorities are taking very vigorous steps against whistleblowers. There are concerns about the way they're going about doing that, but at the moment, that doesn't seem to be preventing people from coming forward.
And just briefly, Alexander, will we ever see Snowden in the public eye, do you think? Would it be very wise for him to keep a very low profile, or could he actually go and get a job and walk around Moscow or wherever in Russia, in effect saying, I'm a free man, or should he be playing it very discreetly?
Well, I think he will play it somewhat discreetly, but I will be very surprised indeed if this is the last we've heard of him. I am sure he will be appearing again. He obviously has his story to say. He's obviously got to abide by the conditions the Russian authorities have set, which is that he doesn't do more harm to the United States. He, of course, says he's never done any harm to the United States, but we all know what that means. Nonetheless, there's nothing in this grant of temporary asylum that prevents him getting a job. On the contrary, I mean, he's entitled to do it. There's nothing that says he can't wander around Moscow, and I am fairly sure, in fact, I'm absolutely sure, that he will want to tell his story at some point and to the media, and there's no reason why he can't, no legal reason why he can't.
Well, it's been certainly great to talk to you, Alexander. Thank you very much for your time. Fascinating to get your perspective.
Thank you very much.
Alexander Mercouris, live there in London.